Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today representing the EIB, and actually I must start by correcting what is written there. I'm not the head of the lending EIB group. I am the responsible for the EIB group representation in Lisbon since about 1 year ago. I'm going to talk to you about the institution to which I work and its contribution to things like environment and climate action. Let me start with a very brief presentation about the EIB. The EIB is a bank, but it's not a bank like any other bank. It is what we call a policy-driven bank. This means that we are the instrument, or one of the instruments of the European Union to pursue the policies and to achieve the objectives of the European Union. Our shareholders are the member states of the European Union. We have been created at the same time as the Treaty of Rome back in 1958. Basically, our main goals are to contribute with financing and advisory to projects that in turn contribute to the achievements of the objectives of the European Union. Which we may group into, let's say, 3 or 4 categories: support to SMEs and mid-caps, sustainable environment and climate action, strategic infrastructure, innovation, research and development, and knowledge economy. We are about 4,000 people, most of them based in Luxembourg, our headquarters. But also a few ones located in external offices, both in the European Union and outside of the European Union, of which the Lisbon office here in Avenida da Liberdade. We have a very top rating by all of the rating agencies, which enables us to tap capital markets at very fine conditions, which we transfer to the beneficiaries of our operations. Now, I just told you that one of our objectives is to contribute to environmental sustainability and climate action. As a matter of fact, since 2019, the EIB has approved, the board of directors of the EIB has approved what we call the Climate Bank Roadmap, which reinforces our ambition to contribute to climate action and to environmental sustainability. This means more than 50% of our operations contributing to climate action by 2025. All of our operations aligned with the Paris Agreement by January 2021, which is already the case, and also contributing to mobilize up to 1 trillion euros in projects that contribute to climate action by 2030. Of course, this new momentum was triggered by sustainable development goals of the United Nations, by the Green Deal of the European Union, and by many other global initiatives to face the threat to our planet that comes from the way in which we have been producing and consuming over the last decades. And actually, this is a fundamental point, because without putting in question, let's say, the system through which we work globally, we need to steer that system in a virtuous direction. And for that, we need incentives. Incentives in the form of tax incentives, grants, financial instruments, as well as pricing. We need to start evaluating projects and activities, not necessarily according to a standard, normal market pricing, but we need to add what we call carbon pricing, which means what costs in terms of negative externalities to the whole society pursuing a certain number of activities, for example, like fossil fuels. And we use, indeed, carbon pricing, for example, in assessing projects in the mobility space, for example, roads, motorways. We ask the projects to have a very robust economic return, taking into account the features of the projects, notably in terms of road safety, in terms of the use of electrical vehicles, but also using precisely a price for carbon which penalizes enormously, let's say, non-environmentally friendly mobility. So the incentives are absolutely fundamental, again, to steer investments in the right direction. I have been talking about energy, and there is a lot of focus on the supply side. So the need of boosting renewables, the need of electrification of the energy we consume, and so on and so forth. However, as important or even more important than the supply side is the demand side. And this means that we must pursue technologies and ways of producing and consuming which actually involve less consumption of energy. Energy efficiency is, for example, absolutely fundamental in this context. So we need to build up houses, we need to produce goods and services, we need to change the pattern of our consumption so that we will consume less energy. This, of course, without prejudice of developing new energy sources like solar, like wind, like hydrogen, and other gases which are not fossil fuel. And this is actually part of our energy lending policy, which we updated recently. We simply stopped financing non-abated fossil fuels, including natural gas. And here there is also another point that I want to stress. In this right point in time, and particularly in the aftermath of the Ukraine war, there is a certain tension between energy security and energy transition. And we can see more and more some positions and some actions that go in the direction of making energy security absolute to the detriment of the energy transition. I think that actually this is precisely an opportunity to pursue even more strongly the energy transition and invest even more in green, precisely to reduce our dependence on the fuels, on the energy sources that create to us so many problems exactly because of what is right now going on. There is also a series of multiple areas of crisis and stress, like inflation, the prospect of recession, rising interest rates, and so on and so forth, which also risk to jeopardize the focus on the energy transition. We should try to avoid this. And of course, what policymakers have to do is to tackle at the same time so many threats, and understandably so, but of course the energy transition and the focus on climate action cannot actually be or stand behind the other problems. The other thing I would like to share with you has to do with greenwashing. There is, and by the way, just a parenthesis, the EIB was the very first issuer of green bonds back in 2007, and we have issued so far nearly 50 billion of green bonds. Now, what are green bonds? These are financial instruments through which the EIB and other issuers raise money for the purpose of financing projects which are considered as green. And this is exactly the point. We need to be credible here and to avoid greenwashing. And this means that the assets which are financed through this funding have to actually comply with a certain number of objective and science-based criteria that certify that they are indeed green and not brown or any other color. And in this context, what exists right now is an enormous diversity of initiatives and standards globally. The Sustainable Finance Board, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. There are many, many initiatives and also a wide diversity of standards. I think that the global community should make their mind and agree to a common standard which is auditable and which is practicable in terms of implementation by the relevant investors. In Europe, we have the so-called taxonomy, of which you might have already heard about or not. This is, let's say, a complex and very comprehensive set of criteria to define which activities are green and which are not green, such as climate mitigation, climate adaptation, circular economy, fight against pollution and control of pollution, water resources and marine resources. So there are a set of 6 activities which are considered as in compliance with the EU taxonomy, both in what concerns substantial contribution to climate action, or at least doing no harm, which is also another concept which is extremely important. Because I told you a few minutes ago that we have the target of having at least 50% of our activities dedicated to climate action and environment, but this doesn't mean that the remainder 50%, they are brown or they are black. They need also to be in alignment with the Paris Agreement, which means that they should not contribute to an increase in global temperature by more than 1.5 degrees as compared with the pre-industrial era. So this is all to tell you. I don't know exactly at what point I am. I have still a few time, but this is to tell you that the EIB is part of an array of stakeholders and entities in the European Union and globally, which aim at contributing to tackle climate change and to improve the conditions in which our activities and our societies operate. And by the way, the EIB does this not only in the European Union, but also outside of the European Union, because we have a mandate actually to operate in other countries across the world, namely in South America, Asia, Caribbean, and Africa. And by the way, these are the countries in which less CO2 is produced, but those are also the countries in which development should be boosted, and should be boosted using preferably technologies which do not compound the global problem which has been created so far substantially by the developed world. So there is the need of some solidarity worldwide and action in order to enable economic growth and development in the developing world without actually aggravating the problems we have with the environment. So this is basically what I wanted to tell you, thanking your patience and telling you that the EIB, and namely the Lisbon office of the EIB, of which I am responsible, have the door open for any of you. If you have any query or if you have any proposal, we are completely open. Thank you very much.